Assassin's Creed 3 is the black sheep of this entire franchise. It's a game that a lot of people, not everyone, but many say is the worst in the series. Which is funny because it did sell the most of any game until Valhalla. The thing is, I never felt this way about AC3. It always had this special kind of place in my heart. It came out when I was studying the American Revolution in school, so it has this nostalgic sort of value for me. But now, in 2021, it's definitely rough around the edges. A lot of the issues that were there in the original game still exist in the remastered version. But was it really that bad? Does it really deserve the worst in the series label? No, I don't think it does. If you watch my last two reviews, you've heard me say this was a transitional game for the series. So many AC games were transitional because this series has evolved so much over the course of 3 generations of consoles. But AC3 really faced a unique challenge because it was both a transition and an end. It moved to a new version of the engine, it tells a new ancestor story, but then it also wraps up Desmond's arc that had been building for the entire series, for 5 games up to that point. It tries to do all of this in one single game. It's kind of an impossible task when you think about it, and that is where, to me, AC3 stretches itself too thin. Ubisoft rebuilt the engine for this game, and you can feel this everywhere. I mean, the menus, the combat, the parkour, the cutscenes, it all feels different. While I do like this era of AC games, there's a level of clunk that still doesn't feel great to me. The cutscenes are zoomed in so close on characters that flat out just don't look very good. Compare it to Far Cry 3, which came out the same year, and yeah, these just don't hold up. The camera angle during combat is so weird, it swings around like crazy. There's also a lot of unnecessary UI changes. I mean, managing tools is worse than ever, and the trading menu at the Homestead, I'm sure you guys know about that, it's a nightmare. This is where it feels like Ubi changed things for the sake of it. But when I take a step back, these criticisms are pretty much nitpicks because I got used to the way these systems worked pretty quickly, and I can't say this stuff truly ruined my experience. It's so popular to say the prologue is too long in AC3. The fact that we start with Haytham for a couple of hours and then we get that big reveal, oh, he's a Templar the whole time? And then Connor gets his own prologue when we take control of him. It's a lot. Without a doubt, it's a lot. While it does feel weird playing Haytham for that long, I found myself appreciating this choice more than anything. Hear me out. AC3 chose to tell a very unique assassin Templar story at that point. Haytham is this figure that you're meant to like in the beginning, and I did like him. But then you're meant to dislike him because of, who he is and what he stands for. And then when you learn more about him and the decisions that he makes, you're meant to ultimately respect him, which is where I found myself at the end of the game. Rogue definitely dives deeper than this, but I love how AC3 challenges that idea that assassins are always good and Templars are always bad. Within the context of this video game, just AC3, I think playing Haytham is essential to the entire experience, to getting the full story. It's vital to understanding Connor. So, as a fan of the franchise, I don't mind picking up Haytham for a couple of hours. I think it's awesome. But I do get why it might be annoying if you're just trying to get to Connor, which if you're replaying the series, you're trying to get through it, I kind of get that, and I think that's where a lot of people find themselves. Speaking of Connor, man, this guy gets a lot of criticism. He gets compared to Ezio, which I think it's fair. I think it's always fair to compare protagonists in this series. We had Ezio for 3 full games when this series was at its height, he's iconic. But when you put Connor next to a guy who is essentially the James Bond of the Italian Renaissance, the one who everyone associates with this entire franchise, he either has to be similar, like really similar, or be so good that he overshadows Ezio in order for people to give him credit. To me, Connor is a completely different type of character, and I'm really glad that he is. I like Connor a lot. I mean, I truly connect with him. I see his pain and his struggle. Losing his entire village and his mom, watching his mom burn to death as a kid. Seeing manifest destiny unfold right in front of him. Being forced to choose sides in a war where his people ultimately will lose their land no matter what he does. And of course, his dad, ends up being his enemy number one, basically. Connor has been dealt the worst hand possible in life, and he's angry. He takes it out on everyone around him. He takes it out on Achilles and Haytham. So with all of that in mind, I was never sitting there thinking, man, Connor shouldn't feel this way. Connor's rage pushed me further. It compelled me to keep playing and see his story through to the end. Within the context of the series, I do think it's fair to say that Connor didn't evolve like you might have expected. Most every protagonist in this series has that big aha moment where they evolve and you see a big evolution. Seeing that on screen is satisfying. Connor has a version of that, but I would say he's more consistent throughout the game from start to finish. So if you're in a place where you just don't like Connor and you don't identify with, his pursuits, then I get that. If you don't like him in the first place, then seeing a lack of change just makes it worse. But I think the narrative of Connor's not good because he's just an angry brute and he doesn't trust anyone, it's more complicated than that. The other criticism is that Connor is a one-sided character. He's not a guy you could grab a beer with, like Ezio, Edward, or Bayek. He's more stoic, like Altair. He's laser focused on his goal, and that's all he thinks about. If you don't read the extended universe stuff and you don't play the Homestead missions, then that's the only version of Connor that you see. Now, I don't think it's fair to suggest people have to explore all of the optional content in order to understand Connor. That stuff should be in the main story. But at the same time, I can't sit here and tell you that Ubi should have made Connor more likable. He has a hard time trusting people for very concrete reasons. But that's not all he is, if you explore everything. Ultimately, I still like Connor as much as I did before the replay, maybe more. I think I'm a little more mature and I'm able to understand why he feels the way he does. And after not playing the game in years, I was kind of surprised by how I felt by this, given how unpopular he is if you ask the average, person who knows about Assassin's Creed. I'd be mad at myself if I didn't talk about the Homestead missions in this video. Before Red Dead 2 existed, the Homestead felt like something out of a BioWare game. You get to recruit tradesmen who live on your property. You have a tailor, a hunter, farmers, a diverse cast of characters. You get to support them through what feels like loyalty missions, these handcrafted sequences that teach you a little bit more about them, but also offer rewards. Playing these for the first time just blew me away. They give so much screen time, they dedicate so much to the softer, more personable side of Connor that, again, Ubi did not show us in the main story. Plus, there's some awesome character development for those side characters that you grow attached to. I can't imagine playing through AC3 now without these. They just feel essential. The Homestead made me even more disappointed by how dead Ravensthorpe feels by comparison in Valhalla. I had such high hopes for it. I compared it to this system and it doesn't even come close. AC3 also does a great job with recruiting assassins. Starting in Brotherhood, we could recruit citizens to help us fight for our cause, train them to be assassins, send them around the world on missions. But they always had these randomized names and faces like Luigi or Maria, for example. You could tell these were not real characters. They were not authored with scripts and identities. They were random. AC3 took that idea and made it like 10 times better. When you liberate a part of the city, you attract the interest of a contact, a big community member who fights against the British, they're rebels, and would be a valuable resource, a valuable asset for the Brotherhood. These are 6 fully realized, fully voiced characters, each with their own unique combat abilities that you can, call them in and help you in combat. It's awesome. After you recruit them and you take down the Templar boss in that area, they appear later in main story sequences, so they don't just disappear. It's still the best example of this system. Again, it's something I really wish Valhalla did better with its Jomsvikings. There was an opportunity there, and they just missed it. When AC3 was first announced, I remember thinking, is the frontier a good setting for this series? Does it make sense for Assassin's Creed? Even now, it definitely plays different from the more classic city games, I would say. There's just more space, more wide open area that you're either just sprinting across or using your horse to navigate. Thinking back, this is really one of the first games in the series where crossing an entire city via the roof was difficult. You can do it, but the flow of gameplay feels unique. It feels different to me. In a lot of ways, it feels like a test case for what this franchise eventually turned into, where world design was there more to support the era and make you feel like you were immersed in the world rather than the gameplay and supporting parkour. That being said, there are some notable exceptions because man, parkour feels great when you're using it. AC3's free running reminds me again of how much attention parkour used to require. Sure, you could hold RTA and climb, but it had nuance. You could make specific deliberate moves instead of shutting off your brain and just going on autopilot. The animation and the fluidity of parkour in this game is incredible. The ability to climb through houses with open doors and windows added another layer that felt appropriate for the setting. Same thing with climbing through trees. I mean, it's another addition that works really well. Navigating trees, especially, this is not a feeling you get outside of 3, Black Flag, and Rogue. It's very distinct. So this blend of new ideas paired with smooth animation, it holds up to this day. It's still a game that you can boot up and just climb for the satisfaction. AC3 has great activities that justify exploring its world. I spent much more time than I care to admit just roaming around the frontier. I went through each city, completed every single liberation mission and side quest, and I had a great time doing it. I even explored the tunnels underneath the cities to unlock fast travel points, which I still don't know why I did that. I don't know why that was fun, but I got that itch. I got to that point in this game where I wanted to just do everything, and that's rare for me. Yubi did an excellent job with the combat animation in this game. Connor feels so strong. The way he uses his momentum to knock over enemies and just overpower them. Some of the coolest moments are when Connor wipes out 2 or more groups of guards in a perfectly timed counter. I love the Tomahawk too. It's an iconic weapon that feels great to use even in 2021. Now, the combat can feel a bit slow, kind of like you're playing on 50% speed, but I think it's there to make Connor feel powerful, and it works. But where this gameplay truly shines for me is in its creativity. The way it encourages me to explore using different tools, different tactics to tackle any situation and combine it in the counter system. For that reason, it's some of the most satisfying combat to watch still to this day in the entire series. Thanks to tools like the rope dart and weapons like the tomahawk, they just look cool. Stealth is something that I'll admit I didn't focus a ton on in this game, but when I used it, I had a blast. The cover assassinate especially is super satisfying to use. Like many of the older games, social stealth is still intuitive and fun when you use it. AC3's main story sequences either force you to use stealth or ignore it entirely. It's kind of weird. In fact, I think this game might have some of the most action-heavy main sequences of any game in this series. But forts are some of the best opportunities to really show off stealth. It really does prove that when given the opportunity to clear camps and approach combat scenarios in your own way, stealth is more than viable. I mean, if you know what you're doing, it's incredibly strong and satisfying. The modern day plot is tricky for me because as someone who likes the present day stuff, I love how in your face these sequences are in AC3. It's kind of incredible because you get to see Desmond go on some real assassin missions. I mean, he's been building up his skills since the very first game, so it's nice to see him parkour across rooftops and fight guards again after he was sidelined in Revelations. But these sequences, just on their own, they're not great. I mean, Daniel Cross, man, he's like a cartoon villain. Outside of the rooftop level, these sections feel dull and empty. I mean, if these were going to work, they needed more care and attention than they got. Getting yanked out of the Animus is pretty jarring in this game. I mean, each time it happens, it feels like the story's gaining momentum. You're pulled out, and it's like, oh, I mean, I really wanted to see what happened with Connor next at this moment. There's also some awkward scenes between Desmond and his dad. I mean, they have a bad relationship, but man, it's so uncomfortable seeing them fight with Rebecca and Sean standing right there. It's weird. I know it gets a lot of criticism, but I generally liked the end of the world plotline. This is a thread that starts in the very first game, so for me, it's satisfying to see how it gets resolved. For better or worse, I mean, it's definitely not perfect. I really did feel like it was time for Desmond's story to end, so killing him off to stop the Doomsday, yeah, that worked for me. Seeing Juno and Minerva clash and sort of compete for Desmond's, loyalty for their end of the world solution is cool. I still think about that cutscene where Minerva shows you how the world will end up if Desmond doesn't sacrifice himself, how he'll become this sort of martyr, this savior figure, and how people down the line will twist his words for their own gain. This is the kind of philosophical dilemma shit that made me love these games in the first place. Even though there wasn't a real choice to be made, you had to sacrifice Desmond, still cool. This is the last game in the series that puts the modern day story in focus the way it deserves to have it. While, like I said, it is jarring to be taken out of the Animus, it made me care more about the present day plot. It's all about screen time to me. I mean, Far Cry 3 taught me this when I replayed it recently with its cutscenes. If you show me something more often, I'm going to care more about it than I would otherwise. I see AC3 as the final attempt at this kind of storytelling. It's the last time where you spend enough time outside of the Animus for it to just clearly matter, before it was shelved and the focus was moved towards the Animus story, the era fantasy. To be honest, this is another reason why I appreciate AC3 so much. It still feels like that classic formula that I fell in love with in the first place. It matters that you're Desmond playing as Connor, using the Animus, experiencing your ancestors' memories, experiencing the bleeding effect and synchronizing memories in order to solve the unsolvable, to save the world. I mean, that alone propelled me to finish the game, and that's not a feeling that any game since has really captured. Just a quick section on DLC. I did play all of it. The Benedict Arnold missions really didn't grab me, but the Tyranny of King Washington is interesting. It's very unique. I think it feels a little silly at times, but once you kind of step through that barrier and realize what it's doing, I appreciate how it went all out with the ridiculous and the idea that, making a founding father evil in an alternate reality is really compelling to me. It feeds into the fantasy of the apple and these pieces of Eden and how powerful they are and how even that can corrupt whoever holds it, even someone like George Washington. Assassin's Creed 3 really isn't as bad as people say it is, not to me. It followed up Ezio with Connor. It wrapped up key storylines, and it added new ideas to the mix while maintaining the assassin fantasy with parkour and stealth. It explored the morally gray area between assassins and Templars, and it still put the focus on modern day, even though it wasn't as good as it could have been. And it managed to outsell most games in this series. Matter of fact, why did AC3 sell so much? I have to look at it when it came out, because it came out at the end of the 360 and PS3 generation. So most people had those consoles by 2012. AC has a very global audience, but it might have benefited from focusing on an American setting. It also could have appealed to those who didn't play the Ezio games, kind of got in a little bit late because of that familiarity, because those games built up a good reputation. So being the next one in that series, of a series that people generally liked, probably helped. In any case, I will always appreciate this game. It had a lot on its plate, and it does a pretty good job handling all of it. All right, guys, that is it for this video. Let me know in the comment section below, do you like Connor? How do you feel about this character? I know he is controversial. Some of you will definitely disagree with what I've said, but let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Plus, you can hit that bell to turn on live notifications so you don't miss my next video. You can also follow me on social media. I'm at jayveeonYT on Twitter and jayvee.yt on Instagram for updates on all of my uploads. Plus, we have a community Discord server, discord.gg/jayveeonYT. Link is in the description below if you want to join our great community there. Big thanks to my YouTube members, Ultra fans, Dave, Grass, Bill, and Cam. Super fans, Tipsy Sergey, Tarl K, Ryan, and William. Fans, John, Matthew, Spyro, JVO, Level 42, Joe, Bloodsky, and Kamal. And supporters, Nos, Sung, Adam, Mr. Hollow, Quickness, Firkin, John, Jay, Sam, Abhishek, Ferris, and Report Them All for supporting the channel. If you want to support me further, click the join button below this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.